Paul Biya is a Cameroonian politician who is the second president of Cameroon since 1982, having previously been the fifth prime minister from 1975 to 1982. As of 2024, he is the second longest ruling president in Africa, after Teodoro Obiang and Guillaume Basego in Equatorial Guinea, and the longest consecutively serving current non-royal national leader in the world and the oldest head of state in the world. A native of Cameroon's south, Biya rose rapidly as a bureaucrat under President Ahmadou AHIDJO in the 1960s, as Secretary General of the Presidency from 1968 to 1975 and then as Prime Minister. He succeeded AHIDJO as president upon the latter's surprise resignation in 1982 and consolidated power in a 1983 to 1984 staged attempted coup in which he eliminated all of his major rivals. Biya introduced political reforms within the context of a one-party system in the 1980s, later accepting the introduction of multi-party politics in the early 1990s under serious pressure. He won the contentious 1992 presidential election with 40% of the plurality, single-ballot vote and was re-elected by large margins in 1997, 2004, 2011, and 2018. Opposition politicians and Western governments have alleged voting irregularities and fraud on each of these occasions. Multiple sources have provided evidence that he did not win the elections in 1992 and the political opposition along with others have alleged subsequent elections suffered from rampant fraud. Ethnically Biti, Paul Biya was born in the village of Mvamkae in what is now the south region of Cameroon. He studied at the Lycée Général Leclerc, Yaoundé, and in France at the Lycée Louis Le Grand, Paris, going on to the Institut de Hautes Études d'Outre-mer, where he graduated in 1961 with a higher education diploma in public law. As a chargé de mission in post-independence 1960s Cameroon, Biya rose to prominence under President Ahmadou AHIDJO. After becoming director of the cabinet of the Minister of National Education in January 1964 and Secretary General of the Ministry of National Education in July 1965, he was named Director of the Civil Cabinet of the President in December 1967 and Secretary General of the Presidency, while remaining Director of the Civil Cabinet, in January 1968. He gained the rank of Minister in August 1968 and the rank of Minister of State in June 1970, while remaining Secretary General of the Presidency. Following the creation of a unitary state in 1972, he became Prime Minister of Cameroon on June 30, 1975. In June 1979, a new law designated the Prime Minister as the President's constitutional successor. AHIDJO unexpectedly announced his resignation on November 4, 1982, and Biya accordingly succeeded him as President of Cameroon on November 6. Because Biya is a Catholic from the southern region of Cameroon, it was considered surprising that he was chosen by AHIDJO, a Muslim from the north, as his successor. Biya's father, who was a catechist, wanted him to join the clergy, but at the age of 16, while in Catholic school, he was expelled. After Biya became president, AHIDJO initially remained head of the ruling Cameroon National Union, CNU/UNC. Biya was brought into the CNU Central Committee and Political Bureau and was elected as the vice president of the CNU. On December 11, 1982, he was placed in charge of managing party affairs in AHIDJO's absence. During the first months after Biya's succession, he continued to show loyalty to AHIDJO, and AHIDJO continued to show support for Biya, but in 1983, a deep rift developed between the two. AHIDJO went into exile in France, and from there, he publicly accused Biya of abuse of power and paranoia about plots against him. After AHIDJO resigned as CNU leader, Biya took the helm of the party at an extraordinary session of the CNU party held on September 14, 1983. In November 1983, Biya announced that the next presidential election would be held on January 14, 1984, it had been previously scheduled for 1985. He was the sole candidate in this election and won 99.98% of the vote. In February 1984, AHIDJO was put on trial in absentia for alleged involvement in a 1983 coup plot. Along with two others, they were sentenced to death, although Biya commuted their sentences to life in prison. Biya survived a military coup attempt on April 6, 1984, following his decision on the previous day to disband the Republican Guard and disperse its members across the military. Estimates of the death toll ranged from 71, according to the government, to about 1,000. Northern Muslims were the primary participants in this coup attempt, which was seen by many as an attempt to restore that group's supremacy. Biya, however, chose to emphasize national unity and did not focus blame on Northern Muslims. AHIDJO was widely believed to have orchestrated the coup attempt, and Biya is thought to have learned of the plot in advance and to have disbanded the Republican Guard in response, forcing the coup plotters to act earlier than they had planned, which may have been a crucial factor in the coup's failure. Under his rule, the country adopted a structural adjustment plan submitted to it by the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank, which involved privatization, opening up to competition, and reducing social spending. Civil servants' salaries were reduced by 60%, and the informal sector increased very significantly. In 1985, the CNU was transformed into the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement in Bamenda, and Biya was unlawfully elected as its president. He was also re-elected as President of Cameroon on April 24, 1988. Biya initially took some steps to open up the regime, culminating in the decision to legalize opposition parties in 1990. According to official results, Biya won the first multi-party presidential election, held on October 11, 1992, with about 40% of the vote. There was no provision for a runoff. The opposition was unable to unite around a single candidate. The second-placed candidate, John Frundi of the opposition Social Democratic Front, SDF, officially received about 36%. The results were strongly disputed by the opposition, which alleged fraud. In the October 1997 presidential election, which was boycotted by the main opposition parties, Biya was re-elected with 92.6% of the vote. He was sworn in on November 3. He has been consistently re-elected as the national president of the RDPC. He was re-elected at the party's second Extraordinary Congress on July 7, 2001 and its third Extraordinary Congress on July 21, 2006. Biya won another 7-year term in the October 11, 2004 presidential election, officially taking 70.92% of the vote, although the opposition again alleged widespread fraud. Biya was sworn in on November 3. After being re-elected in 2004, Biya was barred by a 2-term limit in the 1996 Constitution from running for president again in 2011, however, he sought to revise this, to allow him to run again. In his 2008 New Year's message, Biya expressed support for revising the Constitution, saying that it was undemocratic to limit the people's choice. The proposed removal of term limits was among the grievances expressed during violent protests in late February 2008. Nevertheless, on April 10, 2008, the National Assembly voted to change the Constitution to remove term limits. Given the RDPC's control of the National Assembly, the change was overwhelmingly approved, with 157 votes in favor and 5 opposed. The 15 deputies of the SDF chose to boycott the vote in protest. The change also provided for the president to enjoy immunity from prosecution for his actions as president after leaving office. On June 12, 2006, he signed the Green Tree Agreement with Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo, which formally put an end to the Bakassi Peninsula border dispute. In February 2008, riots broke out, calling for lower prices and the departure of Paul Biya as president. The demonstrators were severely repressed with reports of 100 dead and thousands of arrests. In the October 2011 presidential election, Biya secured a 6th term in office, polling 77.9% of votes cast. John Frundi was his nearest rival, polling 10%. Biya's opponents alleged wide-scale fraud in the election and procedural irregularities were noted by the French and US governments. In his victory speech, Biya promised to stimulate growth and create jobs with a program of public works which would transform our country into a vast construction site. On November 3, 2011, he was sworn in for another term as president. Biya won the 2018 presidential election with 71.3% of the vote. The election was marred by violence and low voter turnout. His regime is supported by France, one of the former colonial powers in Cameroon, which supplies it with weapons and trains its military forces. France is also the leading foreign investor in Cameroon. The People's Republic established relations with Cameroon on March 26, 1971. In the 2000s, leading politicians paid state visits to and from each country. These included President Biya's visit for a conference in 2006 and Hu Jintao's visit to Cameroon in 2007. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited Cameroon on January 12, 2014. Cameroon was one of 53 countries that, in June 2020, backed the Hong Kong national security law at the United Nations. Cameroon voted against several anti-Israel UN resolutions, and was the only nation to join Israel in voting against the UN resolution assistance to Palestine refugees. Cameroon cut ties with Israel from 1973 to 1986 and was one of the first states to restore relations. The government of Cameroon uses Israeli armored vehicles, and Cameroon's Rapid Reaction Force, often shortened, by its French name, TUBER, is equipped and trained by Israel. Students in Cameroon were granted 11-month visas to travel to Israel and learn about agriculture, while poultry farmers underwent training for poultry production in Israel. Israelis also trained personnel at 6 hospitals in Cameroon on how to combat the Ebola virus. Biya, AHIDJO's successor as president, filed suit at the International Court of Justice on March 29, 1994. Cameroon's claim to vacancy was largely based on the Anglo-German Agreement of 1913 and the 1975 Mara Declaration. Nigeria, on the other hand, argued that the peninsula had been the territory of the chiefs of Old Calabar, who had transferred their title to Nigeria upon its independence. As support for this argument, it pointed to the Nigerian collection of taxes in the region, the widespread use of Nigerian passports by its residents, and other signs that the Nigerian state had been intimately involved in the governance of the peninsula. On October 10, 2002, after more than 8 years of hearings and deliberations, the court ruled in favor of Cameroon, instructing Nigeria to withdraw immediately from the region. Although Nigeria initially protested the decision, and although it caused significant unrest in Bakassi, Olusegun Obasanjo's regime largely cooperated with the ruling. In June 2006, at the Green Tree Estate in Long Island, New York, the countries signed the Green Tree Agreement, which required Nigeria to withdraw its troops from Bakassi by August 4, 2008, and also required Cameroon to protect the rights of the Nigerian citizens who lived in Bakassi. The transfer of the territory to Cameroon proceeded peacefully under the agreement. The Cameroonian government now presents the dispute as a misunderstanding, and its resolution as a model of peaceful conflict resolution in Africa. At the request of Biya and Obasanjo, UN Secretary-General Kofi Annan established the Cameroon-Nigeria Mixed Commission to negotiate a smooth implementation of the International Court of Justice's 2002 ruling. The Commission's responsibilities included demarcating the entirety of the Cameroon-Nigeria border, facilitating cross-border cooperation and troop withdrawals from Bakassi, and protecting the rights of locals. The commission was chaired by Mohamed Ibn Jumbaz and had met 38 times by 2015. As of July 2019, 2,001 kilometers of boundary, out of an estimated 2,100 kilometers, had been surveyed and agreed to by both countries, including the border at Bakassi. In May 2007 in Abuja, the Commission finalized the maritime boundary, but in 2015, the Cameroonian government reported that a few tens of kilometers remain at a stumbling block in finalizing the land boundary. However, Cameroon, U.S. economic relations were at their highest ever level in 1982, when AHIDJO was replaced by his prime minister, Biya. Between 1982 and 1984, the U.S. overtook France as Cameroon's foremost export market, primarily due to its consumption of Cameroonian oil. Biya pursued a diversification of Cameroonian foreign relations still more vigorously than AHIDJO had, describing his foreign policy in such terms as diplomacy of development, cooperation without frontiers, and open-door diplomacy. From around 2013, bilateral relations increasingly emphasized joint counter-terrorism actions against Boko Haram and Islamic State in West Africa, alongside other regional security initiatives, especially in the Gulf of Guinea. Between 2015 and 2020, about 300 U.S. military personnel were deployed in northern Cameroon to conduct regional intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Biya makes relatively few public appearances, and is sometimes characterized as aloof. Since the early 1990s, he has faced his strongest opposition from the Anglophone population of the former southern Cameroons in the western part of the country. Although Biya made some efforts to open up the political environment, his regime still retains clear authoritarian characteristics and has largely bucked the trend toward democracy in Africa since the 1990s. Under the constitution, Biya has sweeping executive and legislative powers. He even has considerable authority over the judiciary. The courts can only review a law's constitutionality at his request. The RDPC continues to dominate the National Assembly, which does little more than approve his policies. Tyrants, the World's 20 Worst Living Dictators, by David Wallechinsky, ranked Biya together with three other leaders in sub-Saharan Africa, Robert Mugabe of Zimbabwe, Teodoro Obiang Nguema Mbasogo of Equatorial Guinea, and King Mswati of Swaziland, now Eswatini. He describes Cameroon's electoral process in these terms: every few years, Biya stages an election to justify his continuing reign, but these elections have no credibility. In fact, Biya is credited with a creative innovation in the world of phony elections. In 2004, annoyed by the criticisms of international vote monitoring groups, he paid for his own set of international observers, 6 ex-U.S. congressmen, who certified his election as free and fair. In a 2005 interview, William Quantrill, a retired member of the British Diplomatic Service, argued that the reluctance of Biya to delegate responsibility seriously hampered the quality of governance, with trivial decisions often delayed until he got round to delivering them, and that there was too much government interference in the economy in general. Biya regularly spends extended periods of time in Switzerland at the Hotel Intercontinental Geneva, where the former director Herbert Schott reportedly said he comes to work without being disturbed. These extended stays away from Cameroon, while sometimes as short as 2 weeks and sometimes as long as 3 months, are almost always referred to as short stays in the state-owned press and other media. In February 2008, he passed a bill that allows for having an additional term in office as president, which was followed by civil unrests throughout the country. The main violent riots took place in the western, English-speaking part of the country, starting with a strike initiated by taxi drivers in Douala, allegedly causing more than 200 casualties in the end. In 2009, his holiday in France allegedly cost $40,000 a day spent on 43 hotel rooms. In 2009, Biya was ranked 19th in Parade magazine's top 20 list of the world's worst dictators. In November 2010, Bertrand Thiaud published a book titled La Belle de la République Bananière, Chantal Biya, de la Rue au Palais, English, The Beauty of the Banana Republic, Chantal Biya, From the Streets to the Palace, tracing Chantal Biya's rise from humble origins to become Paul Biya's First Lady. He was subsequently given a 2-year prison term on charges of insult to character and organizing an illegal demonstration for attempting to hold a public reading. Amnesty International and International Pens Writers in Prison Committee both protested his arrest and issued appeals on his behalf. Amnesty International also named him a prisoner of conscience. He was freed on May 2, 2011 when the London chapter of International PEN agreed to pay his fine in order that he might seek treatment for his worsening health condition. In February 2014, French citizen Michel Thierry Atangana was released from a makeshift Yaoundé prison where, under Biya's orders, he had been arbitrarily detained for 17 years under false claims of embezzlement because of supposed closeness to presidential candidate Titus Edzoa. Considered a political prisoner and prisoner of conscience by the United States Department of State, Amnesty International, Freedom House, and the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention since 2005, Michel was released under Biya's personal decree, but the working group's tripartite demands remain unfulfilled. In 2016, Cameroonians in the nation's capital city of Yaoundé criticized Biya's reaction to the country's worst train crash in which 79 people died. Critics included government officials who remained anonymous, fearing a backlash. The Anglophone protests in late 2016 were led by English-speaking lawyers in protest against the use of French in Cameroonian courts, which led to violent clashes with police. Opposition party leader Edna Angilan of the Cameroon People's Party spoke out against the enforced use of French in the classroom. In January 2017, the government ordered a suspension of internet services in the northwest and southwest provinces. Criticism of the suspension and increased opposition led to resumption of services in late April. By June 2017, protests in Cameroon's English-speaking provinces and cities led to police responding with force, with 4 protesters killed and more than 100 arrested. International criticism has been levied at the United States for their lack of response to the growing Cameroonian crisis. In April 2017, a Cameroonian journalist working for Radio France Internationale, Ahmed Abba, was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment by a military tribunal for failing to report acts of terrorism. The judgment was severely criticized by human rights groups including Amnesty International. On November 7, 2018, another Cameroonian journalist, Mimi Mefo, was arrested after reporting on social media that the Cameroonian military was behind the murder of an American missionary in the country, Charles Truman, in October of that year. Mefo was charged with publishing and propagating information that infringes on the territorial integrity of the Republic of Cameroon, but was released and charges were dropped on November 12 after her arrest was condemned by both local and international media groups. In March 2024, the NGO Human Rights Watch, HRW, denounced intense repression by the Cameroonian government against the opposition, after the government of Paul Biya declared the grouping of its main parties in 2 platforms illegal. During 2016 and 2017, under Paul Biya's reign, large-scale protests broke out among Anglophone Cameroonians in the area of the formerly British Southern Cameroons. Protesters complained that Anglophone regions in Cameroon, the Northwest region and the Southwest region, were neglected by Biya's government, and excluded from power. During this time, Anglophone separatists claim that government forces murdered protesters en masse, and committed crimes against humanity, including genocide. Certain protesters had called upon Biya and the Cameroonian government to grant them independence. Eventually, separatists declared independence in October 2017 under the name Ambazonia. Numerous civilians and activists have accused Biya's government forces of burning villages, raping women, extrajudicial killings of civilians, and acts of genocide. A petition to the United Nations gave details of police raping students at a university. The National Commission for Human Rights and Freedoms embarked on a fact-finding mission in Biya to investigate allegations of human rights abuses in the region. A June 2018 report by the BBC News found a widespread pattern of villages throughout the southwest region being burnt, including one video of men wearing government-issued BUR, Bataillon d'Intervention Rapide, equipment. The BUR is a special force body that reports directly to President Biya. The report also included a video of a man being tortured by men appearing to be Cameroonian gendarmes. Biya's Minister of Communication, Issa Chirima, responded by stating that anyone can use government equipment to commit false flag attacks, and said that Biya's government would investigate. Individual sources testify that all of those sent to fight the secessionist militia are French-speaking, thus widening the linguistic division between local residents. On November 14, 2019, Biya admitted in a Paris forum of trying to assimilate former British Southern Cameroons into the majority Francophone system, formerly East Cameroon state, but failed, due to identity differences, thus triggering the conflict. Biya became a naturalized citizen of France when he studied there, but he later relinquished his French citizenship when he returned to Cameroon to serve in government positions. In 1961, he married Jean Irene Biya, who did not have any children, though she adopted Frank Biya, who had been born in 1971 from a relationship between Biya and Jean Irene's sister or niece. Frank Biya is seen as a possible successor of his father in the context of presidential elections scheduled for 2025. Jean Irene Biya died on July 29, 1992 after a short illness while Paul Biya was attending a conference abroad. Rumors have it that she and several people close to her did not die of natural causes. Paul Biya married Chantal Vigouroux, who is 36 years his junior, on April 23, 1994, and has two more children with her, Paul Jr. and Brenda Biya. Brenda Biya, who is also a LGBTQ activist, publicly revealed her same-sex relationship with Brazilian model Laís Valenca on July 5, 2024. She later stated that she hoped the post would change anti-LGBT laws in Cameroon. However, she deleted the post and broke up with Valenca after explicit photographs of them were released without her consent on the internet. She reportedly accused Valenca of sharing the photographs for the attention of social media followers and even extort money on TikTok. As of 2024, he is the longest-serving non-royal head of state, having been in power since June 30, 1975. Due to his advanced age, there has been ongoing speculation about his health and potential succession. In October 2024, the government dismissed rumors of his death after his absence from public events since the previous month raised concerns. Officials clarified that he was in Geneva and in good health. On October 9, the Minister of Territorial Administration Paul Atanga Nji banned media outlets in the country from discussing the president's health. On October 21, Biya was shown on state television arriving at Yaoundé N'Tsamalan International Airport following his return from Switzerland. Mr. Paul Biya was sworn in as President of the United Republic of Cameroon, the second president in the history of the country. The ceremony took place at the National Assembly building, before of the people's elected representatives, following the resignation of President Ahmadou AHIDJO on November 4, 1982. At the time of his accession to power, Mr. Paul Biya was first Vice President of the Central Committee of the Cameroon National Union, CNU, and member of the Political Bureau of the party. Elected President of the Republic on January 14, 1984, re-elected on April 24, 1988, October 11, 1992, first presidential election in Cameroon by direct universal suffrage with multiple candidates, October 11, 1997, October 10, 2004, October 9, 2011 and October 7, 2018. Elected President of the Cameroon National Union on September 14, 1984. Elected President of the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement following the transformation of the CNU into CPDM on March 24, 1985 in Bamenda. By enacting the Law on Associations and Political Parties on December 19, 1990, Mr. Paul Biya restored multi-party politics in Cameroon. Since September 1, 1966, the country had been going through an era of de facto one-party politics. To date, more than 200 political parties have been legalized. The CPDM obtained absolute majority in the March 1997, June 2002, July 2007 and September 2013 legislative elections. Despite these victories, the President of the Republic has always chosen to form inclusive governments. 4 parties are represented in government, the CPDM, NUDP, NADP, and FNSC. AHIDJO parties are represented at the National Assembly: CPDM, NUDP, SDF, CPNR, CDU, FNSC, MDR, and UMS. 7 parties are represented in the Senate: CPDM, SDF, NUDP, MDR, UPC, FSNC, and NADP. Publications. Mr. Paul Biya is author of a political essay, Communal Liberalism, published by Editions Marcel Fabre, Lausanne 1987. The book has been translated into English, German, and Hebrew. In the book, the head of state announced the advent of the multi-party system, which became effective in 1990, after the interim period of the one-party system. He explained his option for economic liberalism and private initiative while advocating national solidarity, equitable sharing of the fruits of economic growth, social justice, the emergence of a culture based on creativity, and the peaceful coexistence of values specific to the various communities that make up the nation. Lastly, he reaffirmed the need to modernize the state and maintain cooperation ties with other countries of the world. Marital life. His Excellency Paul Biya is married to Chantal Pulchery Biya. He is father of 3 children, Frank Biya, Paul Biya Jr. and Anastasie Brenda Biya Inga. Thank you for watching this video.